I've been in this role for about 2 years now. In a former life, I worked as a science diplomat for the British and Quebec governments for about 7 years total. And then I joined NSPN, like I said, about 2 years ago. And so this is one of the two programs that I work on. The Science Diplomacy Fellowship is a 6-month project-based program that partners groups of early career scientists with science diplomacy organizations, including consulates and embassies. Fellows engage in cross-cultural team-based projects that provide professional learning opportunities in science diplomacy. Fellows will produce tangible outputs that contribute to the work of the sponsoring organization and increase collaboration opportunities for science diplomats in the field. Projects run for 6 months with a possible extension to 8 months, depending on the deliverable timeline. I would say that it's probably likely that it'll end up being 8 months, just to let everyone know. Some of them do wrap up in 6 months, but there tend to be a lot of loose ends at the, writing a report or something like that, which goes through several iterations. And that's why it can take up to 8 months. Projects this year, we have 3 of them. One is with the Argentine government, another is with the Chilean government, and then we have a third one with the Global Health Security Agenda Consortium. While we do allow international students based in the US to be part of these projects, people or international students or folks who are based internationally, at this time, we do not, we don't have the tools or the projects to be able to accommodate those folks, just because there are time zone constraints with our hosts who are, volunteering their time. So it's kind of hard if, somebody's in Europe and somebody's in Asia. And so that's why we try to have, the teams be based in the North America region. I have 2 former fellows here who are going to talk about their experience and also how it has helped them get into their role now. And after that's over, I'll maybe go a little bit more into the detail with the projects and then specifics about timeline and whatnot, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So Sanjana, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm Sanjana. I was part of the first pilot science diplomacy fellowship program when it first launched in 2021. And I ended up working with Dr. Marga Gual-Soler. She is a science diplomat, and basically my project was centered around global health diplomacy. That was something that I was personally interested in, and I wanted my career to be in global health diplomacy. And so I was able to partner with the University of California at Berkeley and Makerere University in Uganda to create a global health diplomacy course centered on Africa. And so this program really involved getting ambassadors to come speak with students and developing course curriculums in global health diplomacy. And that really helped me improve my knowledge in global health diplomacy, as well as also get me familiar with some of the international instruments that are usually used in global health diplomacy and security. And currently, I am working in the field of global health security and pandemic preparedness at Georgetown University. I work with United Nations, so UNAIDS, basically working with people from different countries, academics, civil society folks, to really raise the issue of pandemics, AIDS, and how can we future-proof the world against these threats. So that's just a quick blurb about me.
Thanks, Sanjana. Garrett, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Garrett. I was a science diplomacy fellow in 2022. So the second cohort, I worked with the Netherlands Innovation Network on a project looking at different innovation ecosystems across both the US and the Netherlands. So the team looked at cities in the US, such as Boston and Pittsburgh, as well as cities in the Netherlands, like Eindhoven and Delft, really kind of digging into those individual ecosystems to kind of understand what makes them tick, what drives innovation, things that might be different across cities. So maybe one city had more government intervention, and maybe one was more driven purely by universities, so on and so forth. Really with the goal to try to understand, how we can put initiatives and programs in place that might help to, further bolster innovation in areas that we're looking to support. The project itself involved a lot of really useful skills, from things like, cold outreach to people, in a city like Pittsburgh, and setting up interviews and, meetings to kind of understand, the activities that they have going on, to things like, digging into NSF and census data to try to understand, the various metrics of innovation, whether it's BC funding or publications and things like that. As well as broadly report writing and kind of learning to synthesize the findings across all of those ways. I found it to be an incredibly useful project to kind of further get my feet wet in kind of the area of science diplomacy. And I think it was really useful as I was getting ready to look for jobs. And so now I'm the head of science and innovation at the British Consulate in New York City, broadly working to build and support UK-US connections across areas of science and research. So everything from AI to bioengineering to fusion energy, really working to kind of forge UK-US ties in those areas.
Great, thank you, Garrett. So I'm just going to quickly run through the projects that we have this year. So the first one is Argentina-US research partnerships in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, energy transition, and nuclear medicine. So it's a very vast, field of topics that you'll be working on for the embassy in Argentina that's based in Washington, D.C. And basically, they are looking to have a report at the end on potential research partners for particular Argentine universities or institutions in these 4 project areas. So AI, biotech, energy, and nuclear medicine. The other project is with the Consulate General of Chile in San Francisco. It's building a scientific innovation and entrepreneurship network for the Chilean community. So this project will work to identify Chilean economic innovation and research activities in the Bay Area, and characterize the type of tech and science advances. The fellows working on this will also design a tool for data collection to inform the first activity, and help establish a comprehensive database, and create a tool and process to facilitate communication between stakeholders. Hold on, I gotta let some folks in who are in the waiting room. And then the third project is with the Global Health Security Agenda Consortium, which is a voluntary alliance of non-governmental entities that support strengthening global capacities to prevent, detect, and respond to emerging disease threats through the implementation of the Global Health Security Agenda and other health security agreements, policies, and frameworks. So they have different projects that they would have fellows work on. So one is supporting the task force on advocacy and communication. The second is assist with analyses, reports, and stakeholder maps. This one would work with representatives of the US government with a focus on the Department of Health and Human Services and the Office of Global Affairs and the CDC and other non-governmental entities represented in the consortium to develop outreach strategies, policies, tools that are not communications focused. And the third one is working on something they're calling Action Package 3, biosafety and biosecurity with the US government, bridging gaps in health security. And that project is still being worked out, the little details. So we'll have more details after the first round of applications are submitted. In regards to timeline of the projects and the application cycle, so applications are open until the 12th. They will close those who they'll be reviewed over a week's time. Those who are invited to the next stage where they'll be filling out project matching applications will receive that notification by December 22nd. And unfortunately, just due to timing, we will ask people to complete applications over the holiday break. Again, I apologize, but we really needed to get this started in early January. And then orientation and project launches will happen probably the first and second weeks of January, most likely the second week, just given everyone's schedule and people might still be traveling. But the orientation will be about 2 hours. We'll have a keynote speaker, and then we'll just kind of launch into the logistics of the projects and you know, what to expect for the next 6 to 8 months. I'm trying to think of, and then in terms of this application coming up right now, the application is different from previous years, and that we're focusing on engagement in science policy and science diplomacy inside and outside of the National Science Policy Network. So we're really looking for folks who are, you know, have some level of interest and can demonstrate this interest through work that they're doing or work that they have done, as we think that that's like a solid basis for you know, launching into these projects, because we want them to be useful to both you and the hosts. So now I think I can open it up for questions. Hopefully I answered the basics here. So feel free to raise your hand, write something in the chat.
Hello, hi. My name is Walter Miller.
Hi, Walter.
And I have a few questions. I want to ask you, is this selection as similar to the PMF program?
Oh, the presidential.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a totally virtual 6-month program. And I know actually some folks who have done this program have applied for fellowships like the Presidential Management Fellowship and the AAAS Fellowship when they have gotten in. But this is more like a stepping stone to those kinds of projects, or sorry, fellowships.
Okay, so I got selected as a semifinalist for the PMF, and I wanted to make sure they didn't collide with each other. That's my main concern.
Okay, we have had folks that are AAAS fellows that are working for the US government who do this at the same time. So there haven't, you know, I guess it just depends on where you're placed and how your, you know, line manager deals with this sort of thing. But like I said, we had somebody that was working at Commerce and USDA, and it wasn't an issue. But it depends. If you know, if you were at like state or something, it might be an issue. We haven't faced that yet.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am.
Yep, thanks, Walter.
Hello, a quick question, if you don't mind, and you might have covered this already. I was a little bit late to the meeting, but Just wanted to confirm you're, I guess, kind of recruiting fellows and stuff, not necessarily looking for projects, new projects. So it's the 3 projects you mentioned, correct?
Yeah, but we actually were in talks with Dr. Alston Schwer from STAS about hosting a project with state, and
Oh.
unfortunately it didn't work out. We couldn't get approval in time, but if you do want to have a project hosted, I'll put my name or my email in the chat, and you can reach out to me, and that's something we can discuss on the side.
That'd be lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I have a question for the previous fellows. I was wondering, since the idea is that you kind of balance this fellowship with other work commitments, I'm getting towards the end of my PhD, and I was wondering how easy or difficult was it to balance the work for this fellowship with the other commitments that you had at the time?
Garrett, go ahead. Then I can go ahead after you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was gonna say I think I'm probably in a similar situation that you're in, and that I defended my PhD during the kind of, well, I guess towards the end of the program. It's I think it's definitely designed to be kind of part-time and kind of an on the side thing. I don't think from the host or from anyone there'd be any expectation that this would take precedence over kind of your path to graduation and that. Definitely a bit of just balancing and even kind of further building that useful skill of kind of balancing activities and that. I really just made it work on evenings and weekends and that, and ended up not really having too much issue.
Yeah, and I can jump in. In my case, we had a conversation with our host, so with Marga, and we basically talked about what our monthly hours might look like, what the weekly hours might look like. And for me and my team, it was pretty much maybe 2 hours per week in the beginning. And then once we were getting closer to the deliverable, that's when we had to put a little bit more effort, a little bit more hours in it. But otherwise, it's definitely manageable. I was working full-time for the government at that point of time, and I was able to do this fellowship as well.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
And Sarah, I'll just note that all of the hosts are aware that they have either masters or PhDs or postdocs in their programs, and some of the hosts have their PhDs as well, so they understand, but they know that you're not really supposed to be doing more than 5 hours a week. I would say that it's probably around 10 to 20 hours a month, depending on, I think once you get towards the end of the project, like when you're report writing, it might get a little bit more intense, but if you're doing interviews of stakeholders in that, it won't be 10 hours a week, for example. Okay, so we have a few questions in the chat. What are some key things that the reviewers would like to see on the application, particularly if one does not have science diplomacy experience? So I will answer this, but then Sanjana, could you answer this too? Because I know you were a reviewer last year. So I did mention that the application has changed. If you are a member of NSPN, I would say that definitely helps if you're engaged in activities. But if you're not, and this is your kind of first foray, I mean, don't see that as like a negative and you won't be able to get into the program at all. I would say that, if you have an interest in science policy, it doesn't have to be science diplomacy. So science policy is fine. Science communication is fine. Something maybe that's kind of outside of the realm of bench work or whatever other kind of research is you're doing for your PhD or master's or undergrad. Yeah, Sanjana, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and also just based on some of the, for instance, like, do you know what science diplomacy is? Do you know what that concept is? How do you see us in the world using the concept of science diplomacy to solve some global challenges? So for instance, like in infectious diseases, smallpox was such a great example. And, have including some of those examples in your applications might show that you know what the concept is. And then also something that I also looked at was, how do you plan on using this experience in your career? So for instance, are you thinking of moving into the government or multilateral organizations? What are your goals, either short-term goals, long-term goals? So some of those things just to keep in mind while you write your application.
Thanks, Sanjana. So we have a question. Do you have any advice for prospective undergraduate applicants for the program? So I think this past year we had 2 undergraduate fellows. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. I would say, again, having engagement with the National Science Policy Network or outside in some other capacity that shows that you're interested in science policy or science diplomacy would be really helpful. And, if you don't have that experience now, this is an annual program. So I would say, you could take the next year to become really engaged in this space and then think about applying next year. Let's see. Another question. I was wondering if the application review if the application review process would prioritize candidates with terminal degrees as compared to recent graduates from bachelor's. Like I said, it depends on like the amount of engagement you're doing in science policy and science diplomacy. And, you could be an equally strong candidate if you're an undergrad, if you are doing a ton of work in this space, or a ton of work within the National Science Policy Network or outside within your own university or whatnot. And you could beat out a PhD candidate who has never done anything in this space. So yeah, it's more about what you're doing outside of research and science, and how that can be applied to this space. What is the number of fellows that the program is looking to recruit? So it's going to be between 12 and 16 this year. We are still waiting on some last minute feedback. There might be a 4th project, but yeah, at this point, it's going to be between 12 and 16. And every year it's 10 to 20 fellows, because the hosts can only manage so many fellows. We try to only give them about 4 or 5. And then, yeah, we don't want to overburden them with too many graduate or undergraduate students and people's schedules to manage, because there is, we do, have monthly check-ins so that there's an ability to make sure that everything's going in the right direction. And we even sometimes ask that maybe there's bi-weekly check-ins if possible, just so, nothing gets off track. Faith, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, I just have, I guess, a question going off of that. So given that these are kind of grouped together, or like they're kind of chosen to go to a project within a group, I'm wondering if the fellows can speak on, one, how they chose their project, and then 2, how they maybe interacted with others that was chosen, if that was even a thing, when you were like doing your project, since this is completely virtual.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I mean, there were 4 of us in my group, and I would say due to the kind of nature of us coordinating, the various kind of city innovation ecosystems and setting up interviews and that, there was definitely a lot of kind of crosstalk and a lot of opportunity to even virtually be in the same room and same conversations as them, and yeah, so we had pretty much monthly check-ins with the program host, but in the kind of interim, I think we would have kind of bi-weekly calls amongst the graduate students, just to kind of ensure we were all on the same page and progressing. I think, and Patricia, I don't know how it is this year, but there's also a couple opportunities to kind of like meet fellows outside of even your project through some kind of social and professional development activities that kind of ran on the side of the main program.
Yeah, there's the orientation program, and then the Science Diplomacy Committee actually puts on a lot of skills development courses, which we used to do in the Science Diplomacy Fellowship. But this year we were lucky enough to have one of Garrett's colleagues do a foresight workshop. So yeah, we would like to continue doing projects and skill development for all of the fellows together, to, you know, reconnect and build additional skills outside of the projects that they're working on. Sanjana, do you have any thoughts?
No, I agree with everything Garrett said. For us, at least, because ours was the pilot program, in my cohort, we had 5 people, and we were able to really work with Marga and choose what projects we wanted to work on. And so 3 of us, we started working on this one project on global health diplomacy, and that was based on some of our interest in that. And then I'd also say that apart from the fellowship, I'm actually friends now with 2 of my team members, and I actually hung out with one of them this past weekend. So I think it's, you know, building that connection and community even after the fellowship ends. That's something that you're going to get out of the program.
That's great. Who is it?
Lindsay.
Oh, okay. That's great. Okay, so this is a question for the alumni panelists again. I was wondering what your typical day now as science diplomats look like, and what introduced you to science diplomacy.
Garrett, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I can go first. Yeah, so the question was kind of the path and then today. So and first off, I'm very impressed at an undergrad who's knowledgeable and interested in these topics. When I was an undergrad, I majored in both biology and political science, but had no understanding of the intersection. It wasn't until I moved to Boston for my PhD and began to interact with some of the consulates and other kind of science policy institutions in the area that I even understood that there was an intersection. But once I did, kind of throughout the rest of my PhD, I was pretty keen to have activities like the Science Diplomacy Fellowship to kind of further understand kind of what it might be like, you know, when I eventually kind of joined that path. Now, I mean, the honest thing is that there really is no kind of normal day. Really a lot of meetings, both with people in the UK and here within my region. This week, Imperial College London is in town. And so I have, you know, 3 or 4 days with them where I'm focused on quantum computing and, you know, meeting with area universities and trying to identify potential areas for collaboration. A couple of weeks ago, I was very focused on AI. As you might have seen, the UK has been doing a lot on AI safety, and so we've had a couple of events kind of on that focus. But really, all in all, you know, again, kind of the main theme of my work is kind of facilitating. I would say trying to bring together kind of the best of the UK and the best of my region here in the US to kind of work together more effectively on kind of some of the key areas of science.
For me, so I'm a microbiologist, and I think when I was doing undergrad, I basically, like, we pretty much learned, you know, the international partnerships for vaccinations, like smallpox is one example, polio is another example. And so I had a concept about what this was, but I didn't know that there was a term for it. I didn't know there was science diplomacy, or I didn't know it was global health diplomacy or global health security. And so I actually came across those terms in academic Twitter. So if you don't have academic Twitter, I would highly recommend you make one, and then you follow people in the field of science diplomacy. And if you're interested in global health security, there are a lot of people who are on Twitter who are tweeting about global health security issues today. And then I'm also going to post this in the chat. This was one of the first books that I bought. It's called Disease Diplomacy. And it really introduced me, this was back in 2020 when I was not even in this field of global health security. It really introduced me into the international health regulations, the pandemic influenza preparedness frameworks, all these global instruments that countries were negotiating, were working on to really help protect against infectious disease threats. And so I was able to find my foot in the door through Twitter as well. My previous boss, she posted this posting on global health security on Twitter. I ended up sending her a DM. That's how I got in my first job in global health security. Currently, I am working at Georgetown University with this organization called the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law. Basically, my work is pretty much it's a combination of research, coordination with the UN. I'm part of the executive secretariat that coordinates the activities of this global council that's been convened by the UN. And so that's a lot of, for instance, writing advocacy briefs, doing research posts for them, background reports. And an example that I can give you is from a couple of months ago, when the UN General Assembly was happening in September, I did research on the pandemic treaty, which is currently being negotiated, and basically looking at what the gaps are in the pandemic treaty and how can this global council put out a statement based on the research that I did on how can we, tell policymakers or decision makers what should they do next. And they distributed that to mission heads, to diplomats, to treaty negotiators. So that's basically what my position looks like today.
Great. We have a few logistical questions. So one is about international students and OPT or CPT. I believe that we determined that international students would have to apply for an OPT. Sanjana, did you have to apply for an OPT when you were doing this, or?
No, I was on a different visa. I was on a J1 visa, but I was able to work part-time on this. As long as it doesn't, if you're an OPT, I don't think it can exceed a certain amount of hours. So just make sure that you check with your international advisor at the university.
Yeah. And then there's a few other questions. When is the next fellowship cycle estimated to run? So this runs once a year, unfortunately. So we have, there might be an opportunity to do another one, maybe in the fall, since this will run from January to August. But we typically, it takes like a full year. And then we start doing host recruitment in late summer. And are the fellowship positions funded? Yes, I should have mentioned this. I apologize. We are funded by the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, and we are able to provide $500 for 6 to 8 months of work. It's not a lot of money. I apologize for that. We do have better funded programs at NSPN. So if you would like to get science policy training, but you want to get paid a little bit more, there is a SciPol Scholars Program. They get more funding, unfortunately. Okay, so there's another question. I'm wondering how much context to include in the past experience bulleted list, since it says no paragraphs, but I think some context could be helpful. I think you can, like write a sentence or two. It doesn't just have to be like a short little blurb. I think you could write a little bit more if you feel like it would support your case. I think that's fine. No one's going to discount you for writing. Well, if you wrote in a paragraph where we said bullet points, then yes, but as long as you're not writing like 200 words of prose, I think we're fine. Any other questions? Oh, you have mic issues. That's fine. You can just type it in the chat. All right, while we wait for his question. How is the PhD experience for the panelists? Like, what is their background? I'm assuming. Do you want to talk about what your PhD was in and how that maybe helped where you are now? I know, Sanjana, you kind of touched on it, but if you want to say anything else.
Sure, I can start. I have a PhD in microbiology, and then my work was a lot on antimicrobial resistance and epidemiology. So I think for me, antimicrobial resistance is a huge global health issue as well. And so I think I was able to really tie some of that experience in to all my positions after finishing up grad school. Diplomacy work life sounds very different from PhD research. So my current job does have a little bit of research components to it as well. I do both quantitative and qualitative research as well. When I did my PhD, I had a background in epi, right? So I did a little bit of stats. Now I use stats from a policy impact perspective. So how do, for instance, certain laws around pandemic preparedness, how does that impact mortality or morbidity? So it's a little bit of a lot of different things from that you'll get from your PhD experience. And then depending on if you move to other positions which are not research focused, so for instance, coordination, I think you do a lot of that in your PhD as well. Project management, you're managing multiple projects, you're facilitating conversations between different postdoc scientists, and so you really be able to transfer some of those skills from your PhD to the science diplomacy space as well. Garrett?
Yeah, so I have a PhD in immunology, autoimmune diseases. Yeah, I would say my role, the topics and activities are extremely different. So, I went from, roughly focusing on the same question every day for 6 years to having more or less every week or so be something completely different. Even in November, I had a couple weeks on AI, a week on fusion energy, a week on quantum. You really kind of, at least in the role that I'm in, have to kind of be open and interested in kind of the wide breadth of various sciences and realize that you're not going to be an expert probably in any of them, but the important thing is kind of being able to converse with both government and academia and industry on the topic. With that said, and I think as you kind of alluded to, the skills in that are still very transferable. I mean, project management, working effectively in groups, writing, particularly kind of writing for non-scientist audiences, are all extremely, extremely valued in my role. And the ability I had to kind of at any time manage multiple research projects clearly has been useful in kind of managing multiple kind of policy and diplomacy projects in this role.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly piggyback off what Garrett said. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I used to work in science diplomacy, and then the past 2 years I've been working in tech diplomacy. So, if your background's in something different and you want to be more focused like Sanjana, or my background's not in tech at all, but if you want to focus on one particular topical area, within science diplomacy, that is something that is, there's every single kind of diplomacy out there you can imagine. There's like sports diplomacy, there's, climate diplomacy, disease diplomacy, like again, there's literally I'm doing tech diplomacy. So, there's a kind of a niche for every person. You're welcome.
Hi, sorry, I have one question about the logistics of the application. So I know it asks for a CV. My current CV is very focused on my research experience. I can kind of revamp it to be more about science policy experience. What I was wondering, is that appropriate to leave any research experience on the CV for review, or is that all kind of irrelevant right now?
No, I would say definitely leave it on, because some of the projects, like, so if Sanjana was applying right now, the microbiology experience would be useful for a project with the Global Health Security Agenda Consortium. So, there are some I would say definitely keep it. A lot of the projects would like people that are, from these particular topical areas that they're focused on. I mean, we sometimes put people in projects that they don't have that background, but I think the hosts, would like at least one person to have, the background. So I think it would be helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Any last questions? All right, I'm going to ask a question to the panelists. What is your favorite part of your job, and what is your least favorite part of your job in diplomacy, science diplomacy?
I guess I'll start with the most favorite and try to figure out the least favorite as I go. I mean, the most favorite, as I kind of hopefully alluded to in the last answer, is just the variety that I get to do in this role. I would say I'm someone that went through a PhD, but didn't particularly enjoy it. So I'm really glad to be able to, focus on so many different topics, interact with such a wide variety of people. I mean, even this morning I met with the president of the American Museum of Natural History, and talked about activities to connect some of the natural history museums between the UK and the US. And I just, even though I'm a PhD immunologist, I just find conversations like that so exciting. I would say the trickiest thing is probably dealing with changes and whims in government, and just kind of having to adapt, whether it's like new leadership or new directions from departments, or that sometimes you find yourself having to kind of realign your priorities or objectives kind of unexpectedly. But that's definitely not something that's just UK government, but it's something that you'd probably find just about any government.
But it's very much UK government. When I worked for government, I was the oceans lead, and then a new minister came in and he said he didn't care about the oceans, so they decided not to work on it at all. But anyways, Sanjana, your turn.
I think my favorite part is I get to work on pandemics, and that's what I've wanted to do for a really long time. And I get to work with people who are in international relations, who are lawyers, who are like completely different from my field of just microbiology. And so I think that's my favorite part. I think my least favorite part is also something that Garrett did mention, is that the bureaucracy, it does get hard. It gets hard. UN does also have a lot of roadblocks, so it's hard to get stuff done sometimes. And then also something that I found a little hard is that sometimes it takes me a while to figure out things which are not biology. So for instance, I'm doing a little bit of social determinants of health, and it's taken me a couple of months to try and wrap my head around how that works. So just, trying to get out of your comfort zone and learn something that's not your primary field of interest.
Well, thank you both. I'd like to thank both of our former fellows for coming and sharing their experiences and how it led to them to where they are today. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this Q&A. And if you have any questions, you will find my email on the webpage that describes the Science Diplomacy Fellowship. So feel free to reach out. And I look forward to seeing all of your applications in the next few weeks. So good luck, everyone.